I'm filmmaker Kevin Hirschner.
And I'm music producer Chris Sangster.
This is Scenes and Songs. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Kevin Hirschner, and you're watching Scenes and Songs, the show that dissects outstanding movie and music pairings.
And I'm Chris Sangster. Each episode, we pick one scene and one song to break down for you. On this episode, we're talking about Inglorious Basterds.
The films of Quentin Tarantino, to be completely honest, are practically tailor-made for our show. We probably could have picked a number of different options from a number of different films. You know, since his very first film, he's been known for using songs in really unique and interesting ways. But maybe our favorite use of a song in a Tarantino film is from Inglorious Basterds, and that song is Cat People, also known as Putting Out Fire, by David Bowie and Giorgio Moroder.
That's right. The song was originally written for the 1982 Paul Schrader film Cat People, but it was used to much greater effect here in Inglorious Basterds' fifth chapter. So now let's head on over to the screening room so Kevin can set up the film for you.
Quentin Tarantino's Inglorious Basterds was released on August 21st, 2009. Tarantino's sixth film was his most commercially successful up to that point and received 8 Academy Award nominations, including Best Director and Best Original Screenplay nominations for Tarantino himself. But like any Tarantino film, this epic, which takes place in Nazi-occupied France during the Second World War as several different parties attempt to assassinate Adolf Hitler, was not without controversy at the time of its release. Mostly due to Tarantino's, let's say, new spin on history. But audiences should not have been too surprised by this. Tarantino alludes to this in the title of his film, which is a new spin on an old title, Italian director Enzo Castellari's 1978 film The Inglorious Basterds. Although Castellari's film was not particularly successful in the United States, it was one of Tarantino's childhood favorites in the Tarantino-coined men on a mission genre. So much so that amongst his friends, Tarantino used to refer to any of these types of films as an Inglorious Bastard for shorthand, in the same way that someone might refer to any type of soda as a Coke or any type of tissue as a Kleenex. So Tarantino intentionally misspelled Inglorious Basterds to signify that this film would be his new spin on men on a mission films, World War II films, and frankly, World War II. The eponymous bastards of Tarantino's film are a group of Jewish American guerrilla soldiers dropped in behind enemy lines in France, who according to their leader, Lieutenant Aldo Rain, are on a mission to do one thing and one thing only: kill Nazis. And although the bastards get the title credit, they are just one piece of the puzzle. The film itself is broken into 5 distinct chapters, and each of the first 4 chapters is centered around a different protagonist. Characters overlap and appear in each other's chapters, but the 4 storylines and characters don't completely collide until the 5th and final chapter of the film. A chapter that will see all of the characters converge on a movie premiere in which Hitler will be in attendance. While the first 4 chapters receive relatively equal time and treatment on screen, there's a strong argument to be made that the real heart and soul of the film is Shoshana, the lead of chapter 3. Shoshana is a young Jewish Frenchwoman attempting to avoid capture in her now Nazi-occupied country, and the first time we meet her, she is literally hiding under the floorboards of a house with her entire family. This moment takes place at the very end of chapter 1, which is based around the excruciating, almost 20-minute scene in which the evil SS officer Hans Landa interrogates a man he believes to be harboring Jewish families. The chapter ends with the SS officer ordering the execution of Shoshana's entire family, but Shoshana miraculously escapes, the lone survivor. Chapter 3 picks up 3 years later in Paris. Shoshana is now hiding in plain sight, posing as genteel, living under an alias and operating a cinema. When Shoshana is ordered by the Reich Minister of Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels himself, to host the premiere for their newest Nazi propaganda film, she hatches a plan to lock all of the premiere's attendees inside her cinema and burn it to the ground. Because both Hitler and Landa will also be in attendance, Shoshana has the opportunity to end the war and claim personal revenge on the man who is responsible for the death of her entire family. Chapter 5 begins on the night of the premiere as Shoshana mentally prepares to carry out her plan. In a film that is almost entirely made up of drawn-out, suspense-filled dialogue scenes, bursts of actions, and instrumental score, this scene stands out as unique. Instead, Tarantino allows the haunting tones and the brooding lyrics of the song he carefully handpicked for this scene to serve as Shoshana's inner monologue and prepare the audience for the film's grand finale. Now let's head over to the studio so Chris can break down the song for you.
The song in this scene is Cat People, Putting Out Fire by David Bowie and Giorgio Moroder. It was written for the 1982 Paul Schrader film Cat People, which is a remake of a 1942 film of the same name. Paul Schrader's Cat People is this weird, semi-erotic horror film about werecats. That is, people who turn into cats when sexually aroused. I know it's weird. It was the 80s. They were trying stuff. But for this strange concept film, they needed an equally eerie and engaging score to put behind it. So for that, they turned to Giorgio Moroder, the father of electronic dance music and the master of the synthesizer. Giorgio might be most famous to modern audiences for his work with Daft Punk on their album Random Access Memories. The song Giorgio by Moroder features Giorgio talking about his life, which Daft Punk then set to music. This song really brought Giorgio back to the forefront of pop music culture and really let everyone know how big of a deal this guy was and how much of an influence he has had on all of electronic music since his time. Giorgio was born in Italy. He speaks German, Italian, and the local dialect of Ladino fluently, and when he was 19 years old, left his hometown in Italy to start a career as a musician. He eventually landed in Munich, Germany, founding Musicland Studios, one of the most famous recording studios in all of Germany. Acts such as the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, Queen, and many, many other British rock bands recorded big albums there because they were trying to avoid UK taxes. So it was a huge studio, and Giorgio was the founder of it. But Giorgio's career really took off in earnest when he and his co-producer Pete Bellotti met Donna Summer. Donna Summer was living in Munich at the time, working as a background singer, and she did some BVs for Giorgio and Pete on a couple records they were working on. They got on really well and developed this great creative partnership, and the three of them penned some huge hits, starting with Love to Love You Baby in 1975 and I Feel Love in 1977. The latter was Save Donna's vocals created entirely on Giorgio's Moog synthesizer. The drums, the strings, the bass, everything you hear except Donna's vocal on that record was made on a Moog. And it really ushered in a new era of music production, one that focuses more heavily on the synthesizer as opposed to musicians playing instruments. Now you can debate the merits or drawbacks of this, but you really can point back to this one song as the beginning of it all. Fast forward to 1982 and Giorgio has moved to Hollywood. He's coming off his first hit in what will be a very fruitful career scoring movies. It was for 1980's American Gigolo, and it was the first time that Giorgio's brand of deep droning synths and pulsing bass lines was brought to the silver screen. It was a smash hit. You obviously see it all over the place now. Think about the score for Drive, or Hans Zimmer's Dark Knight scores, or even the score for Stranger Things. All of these have those brooding 80s sounding synths, and they're all really a big homage to Giorgio. But the one thing that Giorgio does not do is write lyrics. So when it came time to write the theme song for Cat People, they turned to none other than the star child himself, David Bowie. I read that Giorgio and Paul Schrader, the director, flew to Switzerland to assist Bowie while he was recording the vocals. Apparently they got there, Bowie knocked him out in 2 takes and said, "All right, time to go." Paul Schrader could not believe this for his life because he often did 10 or more takes per scene when filming a movie. He just could not believe that Bowie could get a finished product in just 2 takes. But of course he did, and it's what you hear on the record, and it's amazing. The lyrics that he wrote for this song are really, really primal, and they have so much imagery, and they really like set up that feeling of a jungle cat on the prowl, and they're a bit sexual too, because everything Bowie does is a bit sexual, and he's singing in this really, really deep baritone, like deep even by Bowie standards, and it sounds just very epic and very sexy and very brooding, and it all works with Giorgio's synth drones and these weird synthesized bongo sounds that are playing, and all of this creepy kind of stuff that Giorgio is building to let Bowie's amazing vocals sit on top top of. And it's really two masters of their craft just going at it. You know, Giorgio really was the master, is the master of the synthesizer. One of the reasons I think his music is so good is that he was able to play the synthesizer like an instrument. He imbued it with this musicality that not many producers are able to do. And furthermore, he coupled that with amazing session players. He always used ace session players on his songs, and that upped the musicality tenfold every time. For example, in this song, we have Michael Landau on guitar, Leland Sklar on bass, and Keith Forsey on drums, as well as obviously David Bowie on lead vocals. And those first three are absolutely amazing session players. They have hundreds, if not thousands, of hit records under their collective belts. And even though they're not playing anything super complicated in this song, they're still doing it to perfection in such a tasteful way that it just all comes together and gels so perfectly and makes this epic feeling song. If you need any further proof that there was a special combination of musicians playing on the original Cat People, look no further than the absolutely terrible version that David Bowie did for his album Let's Dance. It features Nile Rodgers and a then unknown Stevie Ray Vaughan on rhythm and lead guitar respectively, and it is a hot mess. The guitars are everywhere. There's so much going on. The lead parts that Stevie Ray is playing just don't make any sense in the song. They feel so out of context. And Bowie's vocal performance is substandard at best. Now, it should be said that this version of the song only came about because of a record label dispute. Giorgio's label MCA owned the masters to the original Cat People song, and they would not license it to Bowie's label EMI for the album Let's Dance. EMI and Bowie still wanted the song on Let's Dance, so they were forced to cut this cover version, essentially. And to me, it sounds like Bowie's just phoning it in. I think he was annoyed by this whole thing, and I think he's just phoning it in. It just sounds lame. It just doesn't sound very good. He doesn't have the energy, he doesn't have the passion of the original, and it just sounds very flat. And it kind of just, it doesn't do it for me. But the one thing that does carry over are the lyrics. And the lyrics are still amazing in both versions. And the lyrics are really at the crux of why this song was able to be in this weird 1982 horror film and then also translate so beautifully to Quentin Tarantino's Inglorious Basterds. So let's head back over to the Nook so we can break down that pairing even more for you.
The legend of Quentin Tarantino working at a movie rental store before he made it as director is widely known. And one of the movies that he said that used to play on repeat that he would watch over and over again was this movie Cat People by director Paul Schrader, who's most famous for writing the movie Taxi, the Martin Scorsese film, as well as Raging Bull. He most recently wrote and directed First Reformed with Ethan Hawke. And Tarantino said he would watch this movie over and over again, and it would just frustrate him so much that he used this amazing David Bowie song, and he just said he just totally misused it.
Yeah, he tacks it on right at the end. It's just kind of like there as the credit song. There's no big scene for it. There's no big set piece. There's no big moment in that film. It just kind of, there's just a still image of a leopard on the screen, and the credits run over that, and this song plays. That's how they use it in Cat People. It's actually pretty lame.
Yeah, and Tarantino said he always felt like if he could get access to that song, that he would build an entire scene around that.
Yeah.
And we kind of assume that this is how this scene came about. He wanted to build this scene around the song about Shoshana, and the way he does it is really cool because it's might as well be Shoshana's inner monologue.
That's right. Yeah, he's built this whole epic moment for this character that has had all of these terrible things happen to her and has had to endure all of this struggle throughout the whole film. And she's finally getting her big moment, her big set piece of the film. And instead of, like he's done many other times, use in Inglorious Basterds, using another piece of movie score music. There's a lot of Morricone, there's a lot of old movie score music in this film. But for Shoshana's piece, he decided to use this amazing Giorgio Moroder and David Bowie song.
Which is, as far as I could tell, I know in the credits
there's reference of a Ray Charles song on it, but we can never really figure out where it's playing in the movie.
Hit us up if anybody knows. We can't figure it out. We really want to know where that Ray Charles song is.
But other than that mysterious Ray Charles song somewhere buried deep into the mix, this is the only song that has any sort of lyrics, any sort of real vocals, as far as how they are used in the movie. And kind of what we were saying about using it as Shoshana's inner monologue, you know, Quentin Tarantino says that he writes, at the very least, his first draft more like a novelist than a screenwriter. He writes it more as prose and puts some of elements that is not typically found in a screenplay, like a character's inner monologue. Which one of the real limitations of screenwriting is that you don't write a character's inner monologue.
Right, you can't hear what they're saying in their head, right?
Exactly, like you could do in a novel if you chose. But one of the strengths of cinema compared to writing novels is the ability to show a character on screen and show them living and play that song at the same time.
Right, yeah.
And Tarantino, more than anyone, uses this to super great effect, and especially in this film. And so Chris is going to bring us through the lyrics that were written by David Bowie in the 80s and how they work as Shoshana's inner monologue throughout this scene.
Yeah, it's pretty cool the way this whole thing works, and I think it gives credence to this idea that Tarantino really blocked this out with the song in mind. And it starts right from the beginning, right from the intro music, even before Bowie comes in. We get the drums and the synth drone that comes in right at the top, and it's edited down a bit from the original song is like almost 7 minutes long. It's like this ridiculously long like dance epic thing. But we get a kind of edited version of the intro that just sets up the world. It sets up that feeling, you know, it's really epic and like intense, and it's this like low droning synth that has so much low end in it. And we get these weird kind of, I'm going to call them like synthesized bongos almost. I don't know exactly what they are, but this weird kind of rhythm coming in over the top. And it just swells and feels so intense. And we get that epic shot of Shoshana, right? Where she's like reflected 3 or 4 different times.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
The cinematography matches the music so well there. Yeah. You have this Shoshana in the window, and the way they do these super long crossfades, it gives this effect that there's 10 of her on screen between the 2 different shots that are fading over one another, and then all the different reflections. And it's just beautiful how they frame it together, and it's so drawn out and dramatic, and it matches the music there at the same time, which is also this very dramatic, drawn out intro. It's really bringing you into her mind.
Definitely. Yeah, it's drawing you right in. And I love this when I noticed it, and that, like you were saying, that long cross dissolve that they have, her face is silhouetted right against a movie poster that's outside her window, and it's a fictitious movie starring our character of Bridget von Hammersmark, who is the spy in the Operation Kino sections of the film. And it's just, they're almost like perfectly lined up right over top of each other. Like this one kind of fictitious, you know, surface level person who thinks she's gonna take down Hitler is like out there, but then the real person who's doing it is there in the foreground. It's so cool the way it's set up.
Yeah, and it's right off the bat, it's just a beautiful scene. It's super high contrast. It's very the stylized cinematography. It honestly looks almost like a music video.
Yeah,
more
totally
than a movie.
Yeah.
And it brings right into the next line, which is
Bowie,
that see these eyes so green.
Yeah.
And colors have played a major factor in this movie, and especially in this scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and her eyes specifically, the way Tarantino chooses to focus on specifically Shoshana's eyes, and Melanie Laurent has gorgeous eyes in real life, but he really does this amazing cinematography trick of kind of changing her eye colors to match like the specific scene, and just using her eyes to show her emotions. She can't really express emotions like the other characters in the film can, because she has to hide her true self from everyone. And so she has to be very stoic and kind of very dead and cold in her body language and in her verbal language. But her eyes, like they say, the eyes are the window to the soul. Her eyes can still show you that emotion. It can still get that depth across. And Melanie Laurent just absolutely nails it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, she does a lot of acting in this film just through her eyes.
Right,
It's pretty amazing that she's able to pull it off as well as she does. And just the way they frame it and the way they focus on the eyes throughout, I do not think is an accident. I think it's completely intentional, and the song works absolutely perfectly with it.
Yeah, and Bowie is singing in this weird kind of style for Bowie. It's like a real deep baritone crooner kind of, almost like a Lou Reed or a Scott Walker, like some kind of low baritone thing. It's not typical David Bowie kind of singing.
I can't really think of any other Bowie songs off the top of my head where he sings with that same super low baritone
super deep
style.
Right? Yeah, but it adds to that kind of brooding, dark demeanor that Shoshana has, that kind of cold, like calculated killer that she's becoming, basically, and that the way Bowie sings just lines up so perfectly. And he goes right into the second line of the song, which I just think this is so cool. I can stare for 1,000 years. And in the whole film, we've been hearing about the 1,000-year German Reich, right? How that's what Hitler wanted to establish, was this 1,000-year-long rule of the Nazi Party and the German Reich. And it's been said many times throughout the film. And we get it right there. She's staring down the 1,000-year German Reich. She's staring down the possibility of that being reality to her. And she knows that she has to change it at all costs.
Yeah, I think in her mind, if she does this, she ends the 1,000-year Reich right then and there. If she doesn't do it, it's happening.
Right, exactly.
And so to her, it's she must do this at this point.
Exactly.
Which leads perfectly into that next line of Colder Than the Moon, and that she's completely shut herself off. She's, this icy demeanor, this determination that she's going to do this.
She's going to do it. And it's been so long. And that's the next lyric. And that's one that's repeated many times throughout the song. And I think that is so impactful and so powerful in the context of this World War II alternative history, because this moment has been a long time coming for everyone in this film, for Shoshana, for the Bastards, for Operation Kino, for Goebbels, for Frederick Zoller, for the world, for the Jewish people, for the French people, for the Allied forces, for everyone. This moment has been a long time coming, whether it be Nation's Pride premiere or the assassination of the Nazi high command. It's all been so long.
I even read that Mike Myers, when preparing for his small but pivotal role in the film, said he kind of approached the character as just this beleaguered old general who just like wanted to get this over with, which is so tired of having to live like this. And I think every character feels like that at this point.
Absolutely. And this is where we get my favorite moment of the song. It's so epic. It gets me pumped so much. And they actually edit out the whole verse right here and jump right to the chorus of the song. And it's that drop, and I've been putting out fires with gasoline. It's an amazing lyric, and the music just drops in heavy. You get the drums and the guitars and the bass and everything kicking in. And, Shoshana has decided to literally fight fire with fire here. So it's the perfect lyric for what she's about to do, to set up her plan.
Yeah, and I mean, you can there's a discussion out there to be made. There's an argument to be made about the merits of violence with violence and how that all is. But we're in this film. We're in Quentin Tarantino's universe, and in Quentin Tarantino's universe,
that's right. Yeah,
that is what needs to be done. He needs to fight fire with fire, putting out fires with gasoline, which is a really clever lyric.
Super clever, right? It's great. It's classic Bowie, that just saying something in a different way that you never thought of, but is just awesome. I love it.
And just the shot of her at that point, she just looks so focused and determined.
So
she has
sealed,
made up in her mind that this is gonna happen. Then we come in with the next verse.
Right. See these eyes so red, red like jungle burning bright. And the amount of red on screen here is insane. Let me just run it down. So we've got red dress, red nail polish, red lipstick, red makeup, red Nazi flags, red wallpaper, red wine, red rugs, red chair, red scarf on the wall, and the red bricks that the room is made out of. Not to mention the obvious metaphor of all of the red blood that is about to be spilled because of what she's going to do. It's just honestly insane. Just absolutely nuts how deep he goes with that.
Yeah. And I mean that the classic shot of her putting the makeup on her, looking like war paint.
Right, exactly. And she's going to battle at that point, right? She's getting ready. She's a warrior right here, you know?
Yeah, and which perfectly leads into the next line of those who feel me near, pull the blinds and change their minds. As in, if they really knew what she was capable of, they would be scared too. She has this docile front, but she has so much fire burning inside her that
right. If they knew the real Shoshana, they would be scared of her, even though they're definitely not at this point.
Yeah, which brings you into the next line of this pulsing night, a plague I call a heartbeat. The reason that they should be scared and they should fear her, and the things that have pushed her to this limit is this plague of Nazism.
Yeah, and she's going to stop the plague by stopping the heartbeats, essentially. You know what I mean? She's going to kill the whole Nazi high command to end the war, essentially. And she's, to do this, part of her plan is to make this film, right? To make her and Marcel are going to make their own home movie to tell the Nazis who's doing this to them. So they can see the face of the person that's responsible. And in the part of our scene where we kind of see this backstory of how Shoshana and Marcel convince the guy to print it and how they do all the technical bits of putting the film together. And we actually get dialogue over that. So the music drops right down in volume. But if you listen closely, you can hear the line there David Bowie is singing is, "Just be still with me. You wouldn't believe what I've been through." And to me, that's a really beautiful line that signifies the relationship between Shoshana and Marcel. They both have this shared trauma in their past that joins them together. And
certainly, yeah,
he's really the only person she can be herself around, and probably vice versa. And so that, just be still with me. He's the only person she can be still with, be her true self with. And we see these scenes of the two of them together while that lyric is sung behind it, which I just think is really cool.
Yeah, no, it's a great point that it makes sense that these two characters would only be able to rely on one another at this point. Right. They would be the ones to be able to carry out this plan, and it shows them the lengths they will go to carry out this plan of literally threatening to kill an innocent man.
Right. Yeah.
And of course they bring it out at that point. It kind of drops the lyrics out and it just brings it down to that instrumental break.
Oh yeah, it's so cool. I really like this part of the song. It's got these cool toms, and the synth bass that's so low and massive. It sounds so modern to me. This song was made in 1982, but it could have been made in 2019 the way the low end sounds to me. And also we get the panther roars, which are just amazing, and obviously were more appropriate when the song was for cat people, but they're really synthesized and affected, and I don't know, they don't sound exactly like roars, do they? They sound
not really.
They kind of sound like effects, but they're in there, right? And it's just this very kind of technical grooving kind of part of the song, and we get all these shots of them doing technical film stuff. We get the whole shot of her putting the reels together and all the stuff that I admit I don't understand, but I'm sure there are plenty of cinema geeks out there that absolutely love that part of the movie.
Oh yeah, I mean they according to Quentin Tarantino and Melanie Laurent, she literally learned to be a projectionist.
Right.
She studied with Quentin Tarantino's personal projectionist because, of course, Quentin Tarantino has a personal projectionist.
Of course he does. Shout out to Jeff.
But then when we come back in, that's kind of framed up as a flashback. And then when we come back into the present of the night of the Nazi premiere, it comes back in with the line, Bowie is still going off kind of the eyes and the colors, and he comes in with the line, these tears so blue, which I mean I think you could take a lot of different ways. You could take as this kind of steely demeanor, but you could also take it as she's crying, she has tears, she's very emotional,
I think. And even in this scene, and almost her eyes, like in this specific moment when they sing "To See These Tears So Blue," her eyes look a little wet, almost, don't they? And they look a little bluer than green, as opposed to in the first line, they look a little greener. Now they look a little bluer. They look a little damp, a little moist, like she's almost about to cry. And they're just brimming with emotion, just overflowing with emotion at this one specific shot. She's looking at herself in the mirror.
That was kind of like what you were saying earlier about how in different scenes how he's presenting her eyes.
Yeah.
I think he worked with his color design.
Yeah.
And I think he manipulated things
Definitely.
to make her eyes. I mean, it's not super dramatic, but if you are really paying closely, you can see the subtle difference between the different shots. And, kind of going into to continue on with the tear metaphor, that next line is an ageless heart that can never mend. These tears can never dry, which works perfectly with Shoshana. She is completely broken since the day that her family was murdered. She can never recover from that. She will never mend. And Melanie Laurent even spoke about playing the character this way. She did not want it to be over the top. She wanted it to be cold and disconnected because she has been changed forever by her circumstances in the very beginning.
And I think that speaks to how well casted this film is. From top to bottom, the film has an amazing cast. And to me, Melanie Laurent is the cherry on top of the sundae here. She's the emotional core of the film.
100%.
And she does it with such grace and effortlessness, but in a way that, like you said, is understated and in no way over the top, but brings this emotional intensity in such a really special way. And it's all kicking off in this part of the movie, right? It's like the apotheosis of Shoshana. She's like becoming a fully realized character in this moment.
And by the same token, the way Bowie wrote the song and the way Tarantino uses the lyrics of the song, he kind of summarizes the entire song. He reuses lyrics and kind of summarizes the whole thesis of the song. The whole line of "See these eyes so green, I can stare for 1,000 years. Just be still with me. You wouldn't believe what I've been through." Right. That's kind of the whole thesis of the song, of the character of Shoshana, that you wouldn't believe what she's been through. And
right. Yeah. And it's cool the way Bowie just kind of cherry picks those lyrics from a couple different verses and just kind of grabs them. And you're right. They become the thesis statement of the song, basically. And specifically, obviously, David Bowie didn't have this in mind, but specifically about Shoshana's character and what she's feeling in this moment.
Yeah, and of course, the other lines that he uses over and over again in this, kind of as the de facto chorus, is the "It's been so long" and putting out fires with gasoline. And when that part of the song comes back in the movie, we have these epic shots of Shoshana where we kind of see that she's finally reached that her peak badass.
Yeah, for sure.
Of who she's going to be. And we have this incredible God's eye shot that follows her across the room, and we see her come through the double doors, and right when she comes through the double doors, we hear the song kind of change almost.
We get my favorite sound where he goes whoop whoop whoop. It's just this little bass thing. It's almost like a Skrillex bass before Skrillex thing, but it's right as she's about to go out the doors. Whoop whoop whoop. Whoosh, right out the door. It's so good.
And she's coming out and revealing herself.
Yeah. And she's up there on the balcony, kind of perched over everyone. The whole Nazi party is below her. This whole like kicking off with Nazi flags and everything around her, and she's just kind of sitting up there, perched above everyone, kind of like a bird of prey, just kind of stalking, seeing what's going on.
Oh yeah, there's all these. I mean, they have these great female background vocals that come in, and it kind of fades out, and they have these very purposeful close-ups of Shoshana's eyes as she's looking down. And as we rewatched this movie and took notes and researched the film, we felt like that all of that was an incredibly purposeful metaphor.
Yep.
And to kind of rewind for those of you who've seen the film, in the very first chapter, before we've even really met Shoshana, it's the interrogation scene. Londa is interrogating the French dairy farmer La Petite, and as he's kind of playing this cat and mouse game and just kind of screwing with him and interrogating him, he gives this super long, super racist metaphor where he compares German people to hawks and Jewish people to rats. And he says the whole reason that it's hard for many German officers to find Jewish people in hiding is that they think like hawks. You know, they look wherever a hawk looks. They look in the barn. They look in the roof. But Hans Landa says the reason that he is able to be such a good finder of Jewish people in hiding is that he is able to think like a rat. He says that's the secret to his success, and that he even takes it as a compliment.
Right.
That he thinks like a rat. And you know, we see Shoshana at the very end of this scene, and more or less the first time we see her, it's that above shot, and it's going through the floorboards.
And all you see is her eyes.
All we see is her eyes.
Yep.
We're kind of setting up this eye symbolism that we use throughout the entire film.
Absolutely.
We cut to her running away and escaping, and even in the script literally says, close up Shoshana's face, same as an animal being chased by a predator. Flight, panic, fear.
Wow.
And so in addition to this kind of eye symbolism that we see on screen, we see right off the bat in chapter 1, Tarantino is kind of setting up these animal metaphors.
Right. Yeah. I think there's really something to that. And we see, you know, constantly Landa take this hawkish approach to his search and this hubris, even though in this whole first scene he's talking about how he can think like a rat and that's not a bad thing and all this, but really if we analyze the actions of Hans Landa throughout this film, he's pretty much consistently a hawk. You know what I mean? He's got
certainly in his head.
In his head, yeah, and to what he views himself as, like he's this very he's got a lot of hubris, and he's got a lot of like ego and confidence in there that is possibly unwarranted.
Yeah, and you know, it ends up kind of being his downfall, because he doesn't anticipate that the people he is hunting, the Shoshana, the Bastards, any of the other Jewish people in the film, that they could possibly act like hawks.
Right, exactly. He just assumes, oh, they're Jewish, they're going to act like rats. And he completely is blinded to the power of his enemies. Like, he's got these really, really powerful enemies that he is just completely underestimating the whole film.
Yeah, which, and in the film, when it plays cat people, it's signifying that Shoshana has officially transformed into a hawk.
That's right. Yeah, she's up there in her hawk's nest, right?
Yeah, even the setting that she's in, where she's kind of getting ready for the premiere. Yeah, it looks almost like like she's up, perched high up.
Yeah, she's up in like the top of the theater, and she's standing by this cool window, right? It's like circular and has a smaller circle in the middle, and honestly looks like an eye. It almost looks like a hawk eye right there.
Yeah, she might be staring through
through it. Yeah.
As opposed to the first time we see her, where we see her eyes barely peeking out through the floorboards as the camera's looking at her. Now we see her, and she's looking out through her giant hawk eye at everyone else, at all this Nazi imagery out on the streets, that she has her prey in her sights. And you know, even in the script, there's a line that Shoshana says to Marcel. It ended up being cut for the film, but in the script, she tells Marcel, in a wolf fight, you either eat the wolf or the wolf eats you. And it's just one of these many animal references that he kind of lays out throughout the whole movie. And I mean, to go several steps forward to kind of back up this claim, I mean, what is Donnie Donowitz's nickname in the movie?
The Bear Jew.
And I mean, even Friedrich Zoller, when he's explaining to Shoshana about how he had an advantage, he says that he was in a bird's nest.
That's
it's very advantageous. You can see 360 degrees.
Right, when he was the sniper, yeah.
Yeah, and Shoshana has made her own bird nest.
That's
right. The projector room.
And you could even say that Donnie Donowitz and Omar Ulmer at the end, when they are killing Hitler, they're standing up there in Hitler's opera box, just raining bullets down on everyone. It's very much like they are up in a hawk's nest. Almost.
They're up on a perch. There's so many these different references in this. Even when they're playing the card game in chapter 4 in the in the he has the whole thing about how King Kong could be a metaphor for the experience of African Americans in the United States.
Yeah. I mean, and I heard that that's actually Quentin Tarantino's view on the movie King Kong, and he just slotted that in as dialogue for his characters to say.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many,
but it's another reference to animals,
even the final shot of the film. Of Aldo Raines and Yudovich looking over their victim. They almost look like two hawks crouched on the ground, looking down at their prey. It's that classic trunk shot in the Tarantino film that's been repurposed for this.
Right,
but it might as well be, like I said, two hawks, two vultures looking down at their prey.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it ultimately brings us back to, where did the song come from? It comes from Cat People, which is a movie that is literally about people who transform into cats.
Right. Exactly.
Even I heard Quentin Tarantino in an interview that in the famous dance scene in Pulp Fiction, when he has Uma Thurman and John Travolta, and he apparently told Uma Thurman to dance like this. Because that's how the character of Zsa Zsa Gabor in the Disney animated film The Aristocats danced. That is a movie about anthropomorphized cats.
I love it. It's great. Only Tarantino. Love it.
I think in Tarantino's mind, it makes total sense. And when you kind of break it down, it really does make sense in how he set it up. And more or less from a story standpoint, it comes down to the fact that this metaphor that Londa has based his whole life on is broken. It's wrong.
Right. It's racist and terrible and hateful.
And it's ultimately what leads to his demise.
Exactly. He underestimates Shoshana, he underestimates the bastards, and he overestimates himself. And yeah, that leads to what happens to him in the end.
And to be honest, I mean, he reveals himself to be the rat, right? When he defects to the United States.
Exactly. Yeah. He never had allegiance to anyone throughout the film except himself.
He was an opportunist.
Exactly.
And in Tarantino's mind, in the story, although Shoshana and most of the bastards end up dying at the end, they succeeded in their mission.
That's right.
And although Hans Landa survived, he was a failure because he's going to find out that there are some things worse than death. He's got to live with this branded Nazi for the rest of his life. And it's just really, really brilliant the way how Tarantino brings it all together.
It's amazing, right? Like, only Quentin Tarantino could center his alternative World War II history epic around a theme song from an erotic horror film written by the godfather of disco and David Bowie that describes anthropomorphic cats. Like, it's insane, but it's perfect because it's in the hands of Quentin Tarantino.
And it's exactly why it might be his masterpiece.
Exactly right.
Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Scenes and Songs. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Scenes and Songs. Subscribe on YouTube, like on Facebook, or for audio only, subscribe wherever podcasts are sold.
To get in contact with us, send us an email at scenes_songs@gmail.com. That's scenes, AMPERSAND, songs@gmail.com. Check out our next episode where we break down Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas featuring Layla by Derek and the Dominoes.